Imagine a teenage Filipino boy stepping onto the AGT stage, nerves shaking, heart full of love, and delivering a performance so powerful it stops everyone in their tracks. Aiden Reyes' Elvis-style tribute to his late mother didn't just hit the notes, it hit the soul. Tears, gasps, and standing ovations followed as the judges and audience were left speechless. This is the kind of story that reminds us of the beauty of love, loss, and raw talent. Don't miss stories that touch your heart. Subscribe to Kindness Diaries now, and join a community celebrating humanity, emotion, and inspiration every week. The backstage of America's Got Talent was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. Contestants rushed through narrow corridors, adjusting costumes, clutching instruments, and muttering last-minute reminders to themselves. The air buzzed with anticipation, a mixture of nerves and excitement that seemed almost tangible. Among the chaos stood Aiden Reyes, a 16-year-old Filipino teen whose presence seemed quiet yet electrifying. Clutching a small, slightly worn photograph of his mother, he drew a slow, steadying breath, trying to anchor himself in the moment. This wasn't just another performance. This was his tribute, his chance to honor the woman who had shaped every note he had sung since he was a child. Aiden's eyes flickered with both determination and apprehension as he surveyed the backstage. He had rehearsed this moment countless times in the solitude of his bedroom, imagining the bright lights, the sea of faces, and the critical eyes of the judges. But now, standing just moments away from stepping into that reality, the pressure felt almost overwhelming. His fingers tightened around the photograph, tracing the outline of his mother's smile. It was a smile that had always been his compass, his source of courage, even when circumstances at home had been far from easy. His best friend and fellow performer noticed the intensity in his gaze and stepped closer. "Hey, you've got this, man," he said with a grin that tried to mask his own nerves. "Just think of it like home. Mom's right there in the audience cheering you on." Aiden's lips curved into a small, almost reluctant smile. The thought comforted him more than words ever could. He closed his eyes briefly, inhaling the scent of the stage, the faint musk of carpeting mixed with the clean tang of studio lights, and visualized himself singing with the same raw emotion he had poured into his practice sessions. Aiden's coach approached, a reassuring presence amid the flurry of activity. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, her touch grounding him. "Remember, Aiden," she said softly, her voice almost blending with the distant hum of the crowd. "This is your moment. Don't just perform, tell your story. Let them feel what you feel. Sing from your heart, and they won't forget it." He nodded, swallowing hard, the lump in his throat reminding him of just how personal this performance was. He wasn't here to impress the judges with flashy techniques or perfect notes. He was here to convey the depth of his love and the weight of his loss, wrapped in the golden tones of an Elvis-inspired voice that had become his signature. The announcer's voice echoed from somewhere deep within the studio walls, a reminder that the moment was almost upon him. "Next up, Aiden Reyes, all the way from the Philippines." The words, amplified through speakers and felt through the floor, sent a jolt of adrenaline through him. He opened his eyes and saw the bright stage lights piercing through the darkness of the backstage area, a reminder that there was no turning back now. Aiden moved toward the stage with deliberate steps, each one echoing in his mind as though marking the beats of his own heartbeat. He adjusted the microphone stand, feeling the familiar texture beneath his fingertips. His guitar rested against him, an extension of his own body and voice. The hum of tuning instruments and the soft murmurs of other performers faded into the background, as he focused entirely on the connection he was about to make. With the audience, with the judges, and most importantly, with his mother's memory. The first faint strum of his guitar reverberated through the studio, subtle yet commanding attention. It was the sound that bridged his world of practice and dreams with the reality of the stage. Aiden's hands, steady despite the pounding of his heart, found the chords that had become second nature over months of relentless practice. He closed his eyes, letting the music flow through him, feeling it resonate in his chest, echoing the emotions that words alone could never convey. As he opened his eyes, he glimpsed the judges, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and scrutiny. Simon Cowell's characteristic frown seemed almost intimidating, but Aiden reminded himself that this was never about winning or losing, it was about authenticity. His voice would have to carry the weight of his emotions, and he was determined to let every note speak the truth of his experience. Backstage, a quiet wave of anticipation swept through the crew. Camera operators adjusted angles, lighting technicians fine-tuned the spotlights, and the sound engineers made last-minute checks. Yet none of this mattered to Aiden. His entire focus was on the photograph in his hand, on the countless nights he had practiced singing alone, dreaming of this very moment. He imagined his mother's face, the pride and love she would have shown, and drew strength from it. Finally, he took his position center stage. The lights now fully illuminated him, blinding at first but quickly transforming into a warm spotlight that seemed to envelop him. The audience beyond the stage was a blur of faces and anticipation, yet in that blur, he imagined his mother, smiling, encouraging, and watching over him. Aiden exhaled slowly, centering himself, and lifted his guitar to his chest. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the culmination of passion, practice, and love. As he prepared to sing, he felt a powerful clarity settle over him. No matter what happened next, he was ready to give everything he had, to let his voice carry not just melody, but memory and emotion, across the stage and into the hearts of everyone watching. The hum of the audience seemed to fade into the background as Aiden strummed the first real chord, a sound that was both intimate and commanding. He had crossed the threshold between nervous anticipation and the raw power of performance. In that instant, he was no longer just a teen from the Philippines. He was a storyteller, a son, and a young artist ready to pour every ounce of his being into a tribute that would leave the world in awe. The moment Aiden's voice first filled the studio, a hush fell over the audience, as though the very walls of America's Got Talent were holding their breath. His tone was clear and vibrant, carrying a richness and depth that belied his 16 years. Each note he sang had the unmistakable inflection of Elvis Presley's golden era, yet there was an unmistakable authenticity, a unique quality that belonged entirely to him. From the very first chord, it was clear that this performance would be different. It wasn't just about hitting notes or following a melody. It was about storytelling, about emotion, about a young boy sharing a piece of his soul with the world. The camera panned across the judges' table, capturing their reactions with slow, deliberate focus. Sofia Vergara's eyes widened in disbelief, her hands hovering just above the desk as if she weren't sure whether to clap or simply remain still in reverence. Howie Mandel leaned forward, eyebrows raised, the typical playfulness in his expression replaced by sheer astonishment. Simon Cowell, the notoriously difficult-to-impress mogul, initially watched with his signature skeptical gaze. He had seen countless performers come and go, each with their own tricks and charms. But something about Aiden's presence, his poise, and the sincerity in his eyes, immediately challenged that skepticism. There was a magnetic quality to the young Filipino's performance, a pull that demanded attention and respect. As the song progressed, Aiden's voice soared effortlessly, alternating between soft, tender moments and powerful, resonant crescendos. He closed his eyes during the most emotional passages, letting the memories of his mother guide each note. His hand occasionally brushed over the photograph tucked into the strap of his guitar, a silent acknowledgement of the woman who had inspired every chord, every lyric, every nuance of his expression. This wasn't a performance for fame or accolades. It was a heartfelt tribute, a message of love and longing sent out into the world through music. The audience, initially curious, began to lean forward in their seats. Some clutched their arms, others rested hands over their mouths, trying to hold back the tears that were forming in their eyes. The camera caught an elderly man sitting near the front, his knuckles white against his knees, his lips quivering as he listened to the story conveyed through Aiden's voice. A woman near the back dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, overwhelmed by the purity and sincerity that radiated from the young performer. The energy in the room shifted. It was no longer just a competition. It was a shared emotional experience. Every note Aiden sang seemed to carry a fragment of his life story. He had rehearsed this moment countless times, but in the studio, it felt alive, unpredictable, and deeply personal. The audience could sense it, the vulnerability, the longing, the love. It wasn't just a song, it was a bridge connecting Aiden's personal grief to the collective empathy of the crowd. The melody wrapped around the room like a gentle wave, lifting hearts, coaxing tears, and drawing every listener into the story he was telling. Simon Cowell, who had built a career on dissecting performances with surgical precision, found himself leaning back in his chair, eyes glistening. His lips, usually tight and unsmiling, twitched as if he were trying to contain a rare, unfiltered emotional reaction. He had seen countless acts, many technically flawless, some emotionally moving, but rarely had a performance struck him with such authenticity. The skepticism that had initially framed his gaze was melting away under the weight of genuine artistry and heartfelt tribute. Aiden's voice had transcended competition. It demanded recognition for the story it carried. Throughout the performance, Aiden's body moved subtly with the music, his posture confident but unassuming. He didn't rely on flashy choreography or dramatic gestures. The strength of his delivery came entirely from the voice and the story it told. Every subtle inflection, every pause, every quiet whisper of a note was calculated yet effortless, conveying emotion with precision that made the audience feel as though they were hearing a message meant just for them. He tilted his head slightly toward the ceiling during a high note, as if speaking directly to the heavens, channeling the presence of his mother into the melody itself. The song built to its climax, a moment where Aiden's voice filled every corner of the studio, resonating with both power and tenderness. The audience was visibly moved. Some were crying openly now, their hands pressed against their faces as they tried to process the emotional impact. Judges were equally affected, their expressions a mixture of awe and admiration. Even the crew behind the cameras watched in silence, recognizing that this was a rare moment of true artistry, one that would linger in memory long after the applause ended. Aiden's eyes opened briefly, glancing toward the judges' table, then across the audience. He searched for no validation, no applause. He was performing not for approval, but for connection. The song was a conversation between him and his mother, a tribute to her influence and a reflection of the bond they shared. Each sustained note felt like an embrace, each gentle vibrato a whispered message of love and remembrance. The audience could feel it, and they responded in kind, their empathy weaving a tapestry of shared humanity in the room. The final chord approached, and Aiden's voice softened, lingering on a note that seemed to hang in the air, for a heartbeat longer than expected. Silence followed, thick, potent, and heavy with emotion. Then, as if breaking a spell, the audience erupted into applause, cheers, and tears. Standing ovations began spontaneously, some rising immediately from their seats while others clapped with trembling hands, overcome by the experience. Judges were on their feet, faces shining with awe, voices caught in moments of hushed admiration before they managed to speak. Simon Cowell finally broke the silence, his voice deep and slightly choked. That was extraordinary. Truly extraordinary. Aiden, overwhelmed, allowed himself a small, humble bow, his chest rising and falling rapidly as he tried to process the intensity of the response. He had done what he set out to do, not just perform, but touch hearts, including his own. The camera captured his hands tightening once more around the photograph of his mother, and for a brief moment, he whispered a quiet thank you, his eyes glistening with tears. The performance had become more than a song. It was a living testament to love, loss, and the power of music to communicate what words alone could never express. The final note lingered in the air like a delicate, suspended heartbeat, fading slowly into the charged silence of the studio. For a moment, it felt as if time itself had paused, giving the audience, the judges, and even Aiden a brief space to fully absorb the intensity of what had just unfolded. The emotion was palpable, thick and tangible, and everyone seemed to be holding their breath, unsure whether to speak, clap, or simply remain still in awe. Then, as if released from a spell, the room erupted into an overwhelming standing ovation, the cheers and claps cascading like waves across the studio. Aiden's knees felt weak, but he held his posture, bowing deeply, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. Tears streamed freely down his face, reflecting the bright stage lights as he struggled to hold back the flood of emotions. The applause wasn't just for his technical skill, which had been flawless, but for the story he had shared, his vulnerability, his love, his grief, and his triumph, all wrapped into one mesmerizing performance. Audience members wiped at their eyes, some sobbing openly, others embracing loved ones nearby. all moved by the raw sincerity of a young Filipino teen who had given them a piece of his heart. The judges, normally so poised and analytical, were on their feet, their faces a mixture of astonishment and admiration. Howie Mandel's usual playful demeanor had vanished, replaced by an emotional sincerity that seemed almost rare for the seasoned judge. Sofia Vergara's hands covered her mouth as she fought back tears, her eyes shimmering as she absorbed the weight of Aiden's performance. And Simon Cowell, the man whose critiques could make or break a career, was standing rigidly, his arms crossed, eyes glossy with emotion. The tightness in his jaw betrayed the depth of his admiration, and when he finally spoke, his voice carried the rare tremor of genuine awe. That was extraordinary, he said, pausing to let the words sink in. Truly extraordinary. Backstage, the atmosphere was electric. Crew members, camera operators, and fellow contestants who had witnessed countless performances were whispering in disbelief, exchanging glances that conveyed silent agreement. They had just seen something historic. The usual chatter of behind-the-scenes activity was replaced with quiet exclamations of admiration and awe. Aiden's coach rushed toward him, wrapping him in a tight embrace, holding him as he tried to regain his composure. "You did it," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "You told your story. You made everyone feel it. Your mom would be so proud." Aiden pressed the photograph of his mother against his chest, closing his eyes briefly. He whispered a quiet, almost inaudible, "Thank you, Mom," his voice trembling. The tears streaming down his face reflected the intensity of the moment, but also a deep sense of fulfillment. This was more than applause or recognition. It was a connection, a bridge between his own grief and the empathy of hundreds of strangers who had just witnessed his heart laid bare. The cameras caught the reactions of the audience members, many of whom were still crying, clapping, or standing in stunned silence. Some had their hands pressed to their chests, overwhelmed by the sincerity of the performance. Others were leaning toward loved ones, sharing hushed words or comforting touches, as if needing to process the emotion collectively. The energy in the room was electric but tender, charged with the understanding that they had witnessed a moment that transcended entertainment, a true expression of human vulnerability and love. As the applause continued, Aiden's eyes met those of the judges. There was no need for flashy gestures or elaborate expressions. The mutual respect and understanding were immediate and profound. Simon Cowell, normally reserved in his praise, leaned slightly forward, nodding slowly as if confirming the gravity of what he had just witnessed. "I've seen thousands of acts in my career," Simon said, his voice steady but imbued with sincerity, "and very few move me the way you just did. That was heartfelt, honest, and unforgettable." The other judges echoed his sentiment. Howie Mandel clapped vigorously, a smile spreading across his face, tears glimmering in his eyes. Sofia Vergara's hands found her heart as she mouthed, "Wow," a single word heavy with admiration. The acknowledgement from these industry icons wasn't just professional validation, it was recognition that Aiden had achieved something rare. He had touched the hearts of everyone in the room with the power of his voice and the authenticity of his story. As he stepped off the stage, the crowd's applause followed him like a river of warmth, carrying him back into the backstage area. Fellow contestants rushed forward to congratulate him, enveloping him in hugs and words of admiration. Aiden's smile was radiant, though tear-streaked, a mixture of relief, pride, and lingering emotional weight. He had shared his most personal story with a room full of strangers, and the response had been nothing short of overwhelming. In an interview moments later, Aiden struggled to find words, his voice catching as he tried to articulate the whirlwind of emotions he had just experienced. I just wanted to sing for my mom," he said, clutching the photograph. She believed in me, even when no one else did. I wanted everyone to feel the love I have for her, to understand how much she shaped who I am today. If I can make even one person feel that love, that's enough for me." His humility and sincerity struck a chord with the interviewer and crew, reinforcing the idea that this performance was never about fame, it was about connection, memory, and heartfelt expression. The montage of moments captured by the cameras told the story even further, the audience wiping away tears, judges nodding in appreciation, fellow contestants exchanging impressed glances, and Aiden standing backstage, hugging his coach and whispering to himself, Each shot underscored the magnitude of what had just occurred. The young Filipino teen had not only sung with the technical skill of a seasoned performer, but he had infused every note with emotion, turning a simple stage performance into a shared human experience. As the scene drew to a close, Aiden's image lingered on the screen, a young boy, standing tall amidst tears and applause, a photograph of his mother clutched to his chest, and a smile that radiated both pride and humility. Behind him, the crowd's ovation continued, echoing in the distance as if the sound itself was paying tribute. This was the moment that would be remembered, not just for the singing, not just for the Elvis-inspired style, but for the profound humanity of it all. Aiden Reyes had stepped onto the stage and left a mark on everyone's heart, proving that music, when delivered with truth and love, could transcend language, culture and age, connecting souls in ways words alone never could.